The next positioning element I want to talk about is called fixed. So in fixed positioning element, we can pick one of our divs to stay in the exact same position even if we scroll. So here's an example of what yours should look like at the end. I've just added a ton of images so we have enough content so we can scroll. And when I scroll, my header stays in a fixed position and everything goes underneath it. All right, so over in Dreamweaver, you should be working from the one that says 3A fixed position start. All right, so to do this, the first thing that we have to do here is we actually need to take our header out of the container. We're going to separate that so that it can now stay in its own position and our entire container can go behind it. So in your body, take your header, opening and closing div. We're going to cut that out and we're going to put it right above it. All right, and so now since it's no longer in our container, it loses the advantage of being able to take on all the attributes inside the container, such as the margin left and right auto and the width. So we're going to have to go and set all of those things up again. But so here it is outside of our container, above it, and it is still within the body. So now up in our CSS, we're going to go to our header and let's give it the things that it lost from coming outside of the container. So it no longer has the width of 600 and it no longer is taking advantage of the container being in the center. So we can copy and paste those things and add them to our list of attributes for the header. I click over here and now we see this is back to being the width of our container and it will be in the middle. All right, now we're going to give it our position of fixed. And to fix it to the top, we want to first do top 0 px. And this one doesn't have anything weird like our relative positioning where if you wanted to go to the right, you go to the left and so on and so forth. You actually, well, maybe this, you will consider this a little bit odd. So I'm going to position it to the top 0. But to get it to actually stay in the middle, I have to also put my left and my right also to 0. So I'm going to do left 0 px and then right 0 px. Okay, so let's see what we have so far. Let's save this and look at it in the browser. And when I scroll, sure enough, it stays in its fixed position. But there's an unintended consequence. Just like with floats, my container thinks that this real estate is available, so it moves up. Once I made something into position fixed, I've taken it out of its natural order or alignment, and these divs, as I've said before, are quite real estate hungry, opportunists, so there's this move right on up. So we're going to have to basically add either margins or paddings to push the container down. So we're going to go to the container now and give it a margin at the top, right? So that it will essentially, we're creating a space so that it doesn't go all the way up to the top anymore. And I'm going to give it the number, let's start with 250 px, save it, preview our page again and see if that's any better. Okay, so now that's why it is down here. And I'll leave it up to you if you want to keep tweaking it and see if you can get it to be right underneath, or if you want to have more space or less space. You are going to be targeting the margin on the top of our container. In the design view, it looks like there's a lot more because in the design view, it's giving us the margin starting from the bottom of our header. But as soon as we go into the browser, this will actually move up and it goes behind the header. And so once you start getting into these kind of positionings, floats, position relative, position fixed, you can't really rely on the Dreamweaver design view anymore, or even the live view. Make sure that you are always looking at this in the web page. Now we're going to move over to the one for fixed with relative start. And if we look at this one, this looks like it's already kind of set up. I've already set my header to have fixed positioning, and this is just leftover from the last practice where I used a class to give some of my images relative positioning and to move them to the side. But this time, you can see what happens when I'm scrolling. There's a little bit of opacity here so you can see it clearly. Some of my images go behind my header and some go on top of the header. Right? So relative and fixed positioning do not play well together. But there's an easy fix to this, and this is called using the z-index. So the z-index is spacing element. So what gets stacked on top of each other? Like, think about it in space. So I want everything that's here to go behind my header, so it looks like it's sneaking behind it, right? Some of these things are jumping on top. So I can use the z-index to push these below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my heading a z-index of a really high number, like 100. And then my class that has the relative position, a low z-index, like 1 or 10. And that's going to allow this one to always have the higher stacking. So the higher the z-index, the higher you can think of it as like stacking up in the layers. The lower, the further down it is. So I'm going to give it a z-index of 100. There's no px or anything after it. It's just a number. And then I'm going to go to the class that has my relative. So if this was on a div and not a class, it would be wherever you have, if you have something that's relative, give it a low z-index number. So this would indicate it's going to stack to the bottom. Why am I not just giving it numbers like 1 and 2? Well, ask that question to the Worldwide Consortium. For whatever reason, these numbers don't really work reliably if you give them just standard numbers of 1 and 2 or 2 and 4. You have to give them in pretty high jumps. So I tend to do 100 for my z-index for anything I want to stack high, and then a number like 5 or 10 for anything you want to be on the bottom. Okay, so let's save this and preview. Okay, so now they're all going below. They're all, even the ones that have the relative attribute assigned to them, are going behind, and that is the z-index, okay? So anytime you want to talk about being able to put things on top of other things and be able to stack them, that is working with the z-index. All right, so when you're done with these two and you have them both set up, then show me what you have.